Hello, dear story lovers. At the amount of 1,000 subscribers, I will post a huge series of special stories for you. Subscribe now. The air of Sorrento 9 crackled with tension as distant gunfire echoed through the desolate ruins of the Valis City outpost. Once a thriving hub for intergalactic traders, the city had become a wasteland of shattered glass, rusted towers, and crumbling infrastructure, now the domain of scavengers, mercenaries, and worse. For Ethan Vance, it was just another job. Ethan adjusted the targeting scope on his plasma rifle, scanning the landscape for movement. His ship, the Rogue Eclipse, waited in stealth mode on the edge of the city. His contract was simple: retrieve a stolen shipment of Zephyrian tech. What he hadn't anticipated was finding himself in the middle of a shootout involving one of the most important people in the galaxy. As Ethan crept through the shadows, his sharp eyes caught a glimmer of bioluminescent light. Zephyrians, with their glowing skin and shimmering tendrils, stood out starkly in the dark. He muttered to himself, "What the hell is a royal doing in a dump like this?" Near the collapsed remains of an old tower, a Zephyrian male crouched behind a jagged slab of metal. He wore an elaborate, armored tunic that still gleamed faintly, though its insignias were obscured by battle damage. A group of heavily armed bounty hunters surrounded him, their weapons humming with lethal energy. The man was pinned. Ethan's mercenary instincts kicked in. Royals meant money or trouble. Likely both. He activated his comms to Mira, the Rogue Eclipse's onboard AI. "Patch me into Zephyrian channels, Mira," Ethan whispered. "I need to know who I'm about to save." Mira's voice, calm and precise, replied in his earpiece. "Scanning now. Identification confirmed. Subject is Prince Thalrin of the Zephyrian Empire. Bounty on his head, 50 million credits. Wanted alive by unknown parties." 50 million? Ethan hissed. "That's retirement money." "Warning, pursuing bounty would likely provoke Zephyrian retaliation," Mira added. "Saving him could secure favor with the Empire." Ethan grumbled under his breath. He hated politics, but saving a prince might open some lucrative doors. Besides, leaving someone to die didn't sit right with him, not that he'd admit it. With a steadying breath, Ethan sprang into action. Ethan's plasma rifle barked sharply, sending a bolt of energy into the nearest bounty hunter. The man crumpled, his armor hissing as it failed to repel the blast. Before the others could react, Ethan darted into cover, firing a barrage of suppressive shots. "Who the hell are you?" Thalrin shouted, his voice tinged with both desperation and indignation. "Your new best friend," Ethan retorted, taking down another assailant. "Stay down, glowstick." The prince scowled but obeyed as Ethan worked with ruthless efficiency. He lobbed a concussion grenade, disorienting the remaining hunters before finishing them off with precision shots. When the smoke cleared, the ruins were eerily quiet. Thalrin stood, brushing dust from his once pristine armor. "You saved my life," he said, his tone suggesting it was both an observation and an expectation. Ethan shrugged, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "Yeah, well, don't thank me yet. I just gave up 50 million credits for this. You better be worth it." Thalrin frowned. 50 million? My enemies are bold. But you will not regret this, human. I am Prince Thalrin of the Zephyrian Empire. Name your reward." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Anything?" The prince nodded solemnly. "Anything within my power." Ethan smirked. "We'll see about that. For now, let's get you off this rock before more of your fans show up." The escape to the Rogue Eclipse was tense. Thalrin's bioluminescence made stealth nearly impossible, but Ethan's skillful navigation of the ruins kept them one step ahead of the bounty hunters. Once aboard, Thalrin marveled at the ship's human design, crude by Zephyrian standards but effective. As they blasted into orbit, Ethan leaned back in the pilot's chair. "So, Prince Charming, where do you want me to drop you?" Thalrin straightened, his regal demeanor unshaken despite the ordeal. We must travel to the Zephyrian capital. There, I will fulfill my debt to you." Ethan chuckled. "I've heard that before. Let's see what you're offering before I commit to anything." Thalrin's expression grew serious. "You saved my life. In Zephyrian culture, such an act is bound by tradition. I will grant you a gift worthy of your bravery." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Just make it cash." But Thalrin smirked, an almost mischievous glint in his glowing eyes. "You will see. I think you will find my gift unforgettable." As the rogue eclipse hurtled through the void, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to get a lot more complicated. The rogue eclipse emerged from hyperspace, its hull glinting against the backdrop of the Zephyrian capital planet, Alarian Prime. The world was a mesmerizing mosaic of glowing bioluminescent cities, their spires stretching toward the stars like shimmering webs of light. Ethan Vance leaned back in his pilot's chair, unimpressed. "Nice place," he muttered. "Looks expensive." Beside him, Prince Thalrin ignored the sarcasm, his posture rigid with pride. "You'll find the capital to be the pinnacle of civilization, human. Your homeworlds are quaint by comparison." Ethan smirked but kept quiet. He dealt with plenty of aristocrats in his time as a mercenary. The sooner this prince made good on his promise, the sooner Ethan could leave the glowing empire behind. The royal palace. The palace was a marvel of Zephyrian architecture, floating platforms connected by gravity-defying bridges, each adorned with cascading waterfalls of liquid light. Ethan tried not to gawk as royal attendants ushered him into a grand hall. Thalrin strode confidently ahead, his tendrils glowing in soft pulses that commanded reverence from everyone they passed. "Wait here," Thalrin instructed as they approached a set of massive, intricately carved doors. "I will prepare your reward." Ethan leaned against a crystalline pillar, his arms crossed. "Make it quick, Glowstick. I don't have all day." The prince's glowing eyes narrowed, but he disappeared through the doors without a word. The unexpected arrival 15 minutes later, Ethan was still waiting, his patience wearing thin. He was about to activate his comms to mirror when the doors creaked open. Thalrin reappeared, flanked by 2 attendants. Between them walked a woman, if she could be called that by human standards. Ethan blinked. Her features were distinctly Zephyrian, translucent skin with faint veins of bioluminescent light, tendrils cascading from her head like hair. But where Thalrin exuded an otherworldly grace, her glow was dull, her features angular and sharp rather than smooth. By Zephyrian standards, she was clearly not considered beautiful. "This," Thalrin announced proudly, "is Anari, my youngest sister." Anari's eyes flared with irritation as she stepped forward. "Your gift, Thalrin?" I agreed to assist him, not to be handed off like some ceremonial trinket. Ethan's jaw dropped. "Wait. This is the reward? You're giving me your sister?" Thalrin nodded, ignoring Anari's protests. "You saved my life. In our culture, the debt must be repaid with something of great personal value. Anari is unconventional, but she is brilliant. She will serve you well. I am standing right here, you arrogant glowworm." Anari snapped. Ethan raised a hand. Whoa. Let's back up. I'm not looking for a servant, and I sure as hell didn't ask for a tag-along." Thalrin's expression hardened. "Rejecting my gift would be a grave insult, mercenary. Anari's presence is not just repayment but a symbol of alliance. You may need her skills more than you realize." Anari folded her arms, her glowing eyes glaring at both men. "And what if I don't want to go with him?" Thalrin ignored her, addressing Ethan instead. "You may find her unusual, but her intellect is unmatched. She is a master of technology and strategy. She will be of great value to you." Ethan sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "This is not what I signed up for." An uneasy departure. Despite protests from both Ethan and Anari, Thalrin's decision was final. Hours later, Ethan found himself back on the Rogue Eclipse, his unexpected companion in tow. Anari stood in the ship's dim corridor, her bioluminescent tendrils flickering faintly in irritation. "This is absurd," she muttered. "I should be at the Imperial Research Institute, not stuck on some rusty human freighter." Ethan snorted, walking past her to the cockpit. "Believe me, Princess, I didn't ask for this either. But here we are. So, unless you can pilot a ship or shoot straight, stay out of my way." Anari followed him, her glowing eyes narrowing. "I may not know how to use your primitive weapons, but I've forgotten more about starship engineering than you'll ever learn." Ethan stopped and turned, looking her up and down. "Oh yeah? Prove it." Anari smirked, brushing past him to the central console. Within moments, her fingers danced across the interface. Screens flickered, and the ship's AI, Mira, chimed in. "Processing recalibration." "Anari, what are you doing?" "Fixing your outdated navigation system," Anari replied, her voice dripping with superiority. "You're wasting fuel with inefficient hyperspace routes." "There. Done." Ethan's jaw tightened as he checked the readouts. She was right. His navigation was now 15% more efficient. He muttered under his breath, "Great. A know-it-all." The growing conspiracy. As days passed aboard the Rogue Eclipse, Ethan and Anari settled into an uneasy truce. Her brilliance in technology and strategy became impossible to ignore, and she gradually earned her keep by upgrading the ship's systems and decrypting classified Zephyrian communications. One intercepted message caught Ethan's attention. It was a coded transmission suggesting that Thalrin's assassination attempt wasn't random, it was part of a larger plot against the Zephyrian royal family. Anari stared at the decrypted message, her face growing pale. This isn't just a conspiracy. If this is true, someone within the Empire is selling us out to the Shadow Cartel. Ethan leaned over her shoulder, scanning the data. "Looks like your brother's got bigger problems than bounty hunters." Her expression hardened. "We have to warn him." Ethan folded his arms. "Let me guess you want to run back to the palace." Anari met his gaze, her determination unshaken. "No. We don't have time. We need to act now." Ethan smirked. "You're starting to sound like a mercenary." For the first time, Anari smiled just a little. "Don't push your luck." The Rogue Eclipse drifted in the shadow of a gas giant, its hull camouflaged by the planet's swirling, multicolored clouds. Ethan Vance stood at the cockpit's control panel, his arms crossed as he stared at the decrypted transmission displayed on the central monitor. "Meet on Velker Station. Exchange in 48 hours. Coordinates attached," Ethan read aloud. He turned to Anari, who was seated nearby with her arms folded, her luminous tendrils dim in thought. "This has trap written all over it." "It doesn't matter," Anari replied, her voice steady. "If the Shadow Cartel is involved, they're not just targeting Thalrin. They're trying to destabilize the entire Empire." Ethan arched an eyebrow. "And you think two people on a second-hand freighter are gonna stop them?" Anari shot him a sharp glare. "Do you have a better idea? Or are you just going to keep hiding behind your sarcasm?" Ethan opened his mouth to retort but stopped. She had a point. The cartel wasn't just dangerous, they were ruthless, controlling vast swathes of the galactic underworld. If this conspiracy went unchecked, it could lead to an all-out war. "Fine," Ethan grumbled. "But we do this my way. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. Got it?" Anari smirked faintly. "Understood, Captain." Velker Station, a hive of deception. Velker Station loomed in the distance, a massive, jagged construct cobbled together from derelict ships and scrap metal. It was a hub of crime and corruption, where smugglers, bounty hunters, and syndicate agents thrived. Its outer hull bristled with weaponry, a clear warning to anyone foolish enough to challenge the cartel's authority. Ethan and Inari arrived at one of the docking bays, blending in with the throngs of shady characters milling about. Inari wore a dark cloak to conceal her bioluminescence, her sharp features obscured by the hood. Ethan, in his usual rugged attire, looked the part of a seasoned mercenary. As they made their way through the station's dimly lit corridors, Ethan kept his hand close to his sidearm. "Keep your head down and let me do the talking." Inari rolled her eyes. "I'm not an idiot." "You keep saying that, but I've yet to see evidence," Ethan muttered under his breath. Before Inari could respond, they arrived at a seedy cantina where the cartel's contact was supposed to meet them. The room reeked of stale alcohol and burning plasma coils. At the far corner sat a hulking alien with crimson scales and a cybernetic arm Velker Station's overseer, Krellick. Ethan approached the table cautiously, motioning for Inari to stay back. "Krellick, I presume?" The alien's slit-pupiled eyes studied Ethan for a moment before he grunted. "You've got guts showing up here, human. What do you want?" Ethan leaned on the table. "I've got information. Word is, you're planning something big. I want in." Krellick chuckled, the sound like gravel grinding against metal. "And why would I trust you?" Ethan smirked. "Because I'm good at what I do. And because I know you're working with someone inside the Zephyrian royal family." Krellick's laughter stopped abruptly, his expression darkening. "You're playing a dangerous game, Merc." Ethan shrugged. "Danger's part of the job." Krellick leaned closer. "Maybe you're useful after all. But if you're lying, I'll flay the skin off your bones and hang it as a warning." "Noted," Ethan said, his tone even. Inari's discovery. While Ethan kept Krellick distracted, Inari slipped into the station's back corridors, her cloak billowing as she moved. Using a portable hacking device, she accessed a nearby terminal, searching for data on the cartel's operations. What she found chilled her to the core: encrypted schematics for a weapon capable of generating a quantum destabilization wave, a device that could destroy entire planets by unraveling their atomic structure. Worse, the schematics were tagged with the signature of someone within the Zephyrian Empire. "It's worse than I thought," Inari whispered. She copied the files to her device and hurried back to the cantina. The betrayal. Ethan noticed Inari's return and subtly signaled for her to stay near the exit. He was just wrapping up his conversation with Krellick when the station's alarms blared. Krellick snarled, slamming a clawed hand on the table. "What did you do?" "Nothing," Ethan replied, though he wasn't entirely sure. His hand instinctively moved to his sidearm. "What's going on?" Before Krellick could respond, a squad of heavily armed cartel enforcers stormed into the cantina, weapons drawn. Behind them walked a figure Ethan immediately recognized: Thalrin. The prince's glowing eyes locked onto Ethan, his expression a mixture of fury and betrayal. "I trusted you," Thalrin hissed. "And you used my sister to infiltrate the cartel? What the hell are you talking about?" Ethan snapped, genuinely confused. Krellick stood, his cybernetic arm whirring. "You didn't tell me you were working with the prince. I don't tolerate spies." Ethan realized too late what was happening. Thalrin had been misled, likely by someone within his own court. The cartel had played them all, pitting them against each other to cover their true objective: the quantum destabilizer. Escape from Velker Station. All hell broke loose. The cartel enforcers opened fire, their plasma rounds ricocheting off walls and tables. Ethan dove behind cover, returning fire with deadly precision. Inari used her hacking device to overload the station's lighting, plunging the cantina into flickering darkness. "Inari, we need to get out of here," Ethan shouted, tossing a concussion grenade. "I'm working on it," she yelled back, frantically accessing her device. With a few quick commands, she rerouted the station's power grid, causing a chain of explosions that rocked the structure. In the chaos, Ethan grabbed Inari's arm and dragged her toward the docking bay. Behind them, Krellick roared in anger, but he was quickly lost in the smoke and fire. As the rogue Eclipse launched from the station, Ethan slumped into the pilot's chair, his face grim. That could have gone better. Anari sat beside him, clutching the data sheet stolen. It's not over. The cartel has a weapon that could destroy everything. And someone in the Empire is helping them. Ethan glanced at her, his expression softening slightly. Looks like we've got work to do. Anari nodded, her tendrils glowing faintly. Together. The rogue Eclipse soared through hyperspace, its engines humming softly as it sped toward the coordinates Anari had decrypted from the cartel's files. Tension filled the cockpit as Ethan and Anari reviewed the stolen data. On the main screen, a holographic schematic of the quantum destabilizer rotated slowly, its deadly potential clear in every detail. This thing doesn't just destroy planets, Anari said, her voice tight. It collapses them at the quantum level. Once activated, it would take days, maybe hours, for the destabilization to spread across entire star systems. Ethan whistled low. And they're planning to test it on a Zephyrian colony world? She nodded, her tendrils dim with worry. Valina Prime. It's a smaller colony but densely populated. If the cartel succeeds, the Empire will crumble. Thalrin won't be able to recover from the political fallout. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. We've got a target and a timetable. The question is, what's our play? Anari hesitated, her bioluminescent eyes flickering as she spoke. We don't have the firepower to take on the cartel alone. We'll need help. Ethan snorted. And you think your brother's going to roll out the red carpet after what happened on Velker Station? Her gaze hardened. He will if he wants to stop this weapon. Returned to Ilarion Prime. The rogue Eclipse emerged from hyperspace near Ilarion Prime, where the Royal Fleet's sleek, glowing ships orbited the planet in formation. As Ethan transmitted their clearance codes, he couldn't help but mutter, "Let's hope your brother's not in the mood to shoot us down." Anari gave him a pointed look. If you keep insulting him, he might reconsider. They were escorted to the palace by 2 shimmering Zephyrian frigates. Once inside, Thalrin met them in the Grand Hall, flanked by guards. His expression was unreadable, though his glowing eyes betrayed a simmering anger. You dare return after the disaster you caused on Velker Station? He demanded. Ethan stepped forward, unfazed. We didn't cause anything. You were played, just like us. The cartel used your paranoia to divide us, and now they're moving ahead with their plan to destroy Valina Prime. Thalrin's glowing tendrils twitched, his anger giving way to unease. You have proof of this? Anari stepped between them, holding out her data pad. See for yourself. The cartel's quantum destabilizer is operational, and someone within the Empire has been feeding them information. Thalrin scanned the data, his jaw tightening as he absorbed the grim reality. This cannot be allowed to happen. What do you propose? Ethan crossed his arms. Simple. We hit them hard and fast. Take out the weapon, stop the test, and figure out who's been selling you out. Thalrin nodded reluctantly. Very well. But know this, human, if you fail, there will be consequences. Ethan smirked. Wouldn't expect anything less. The battle for Valina Prime. The Zephyrian fleet launched from Ilarion Prime, with the rogue Eclipse at its vanguard. Ethan piloted the ship with precision, weaving through the cartel's defenses as the fleet engaged in a fierce battle above Valina Prime. Anari worked feverishly at the ship's console, bypassing layers of encryption to gain remote access to the destabilizer systems. I can delay the activation sequence, she said, her voice strained. But I'll need time. Ethan rolled the ship to avoid incoming fire, grimacing. Time's the one thing we don't have. The cartel's flagship, a massive, jagged vessel bristling with weapons, loomed ahead. The destabilizer was mounted at its center, its glowing core pulsing ominously. The weapon was seconds from full activation. We have to board that ship, Anari said. It's the only way to disable the core completely. Ethan grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. The final confrontation. Ethan and Inari breached the cartel flagship's hull, blasting their way through corridors swarming with enforcers. Inari carried a portable hacking device, her fingers flying over the interface as she bypassed security protocols and redirected power surges to disable key systems. As they approached the destabilizer's core, they were confronted by Velker, the cartel's leader. The towering alien, with his crimson scales and cybernetic enhancements, stood between them and the weapon. You're too late, Velker growled. The destabilizer will fire, and your precious empire will fall. Ethan raised his plasma rifle. Funny. I was just about to say the same thing about you. The battle was brutal. Velker's cybernetic arm crackled with energy as he traded blows with Ethan, while Inari worked to disarm the core. Sparks flew as the ship shook under the strain of the ongoing fleet battle. I need more time, Inari shouted. Ethan ducked a swipe from Velker's arm and fired a shot that severed one of his cybernetic limbs. Make it quick, princess. At the last second, Inari bypassed the core's failsafes, overloading the system and shutting down the weapon. The core erupted in a surge of energy, destabilizing the flagship. We need to go, Ethan yelled, dragging Inari toward their escape pod. Velker, battered but alive, roared after them. This isn't over, mercenary. I'll hunt you to the edges of the galaxy. Ethan smirked as they launched the pod, watching the flagship explode in the distance. I'll keep the light on for you. Epilogue, A New Alliance. Back on Alarian Prime, Ethan and Inari stood before Thalrin in the Grand Hall. The prince, though still wary, inclined his head in gratitude. The cartel's weapon is destroyed, thanks to your efforts. The Empire owes you both a great debt. Ethan crossed his arms, smirking. I'll settle for a fat paycheck. Inari stepped forward, her expression serious. The cartel isn't finished. They'll come back stronger, and we still don't know who within the Empire betrayed us. Thalrin's gaze softened as he looked at his sister. Then perhaps it is time for the Empire to embrace unconventional alliances. He turned to Ethan. If you'll stay, I can offer you a position as an advisor. Ethan shook his head. Not my style. But I'll stick around for now. As they left the palace, Inari glanced at Ethan. You didn't have to stay. He grinned. Didn't have to take you on either. But look how that turned out. She rolled her eyes, but smiled. For the first time, she felt like she belonged not as a gift, but as an equal. Together, they walked toward the rogue eclipse, ready for whatever came next.